we have here is Monica, who is an incredible artist. She's going to talk about some of her work with her project Storytelling with Saris and the upcoming Concrete Dreams, which is an in-person installation in Washington, D.C. that will be going up in May. So Monica, I will stop sharing and allow you to begin.
Thank you, Maggie. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to your Young Curators program today. Happy Women's History Month. So I'm a feminist artist, and in my work, I use the body and garments to speak about women's stories. And this image is actually from a performance in 2015. A lot of my work also looks at the intersection of climate, gender, and racial injustice. So I just found this image the other day. It's kind of interesting. I've placed a brown body in a wet red sari on a neoclassical sculpture in DuPont Circle. It's a performance about climate change called Inundation. A lot of people in the neighborhood actually joined me in this performance. But I'm gonna show you, I often start with an image of my grandmother. I want to honor our foremothers, our ancestors. This is a painting that I did in Paris more than 10 years ago. It's my grandmother on there. She was married at age 7, and but she thought it was an injustice, and she fought to have her daughters all learn to read and write and finish school. And she's a big inspiration to me. She was also a fiber artist. She did embroidery she recycled saris to make traditional blankets and embroidered on them. And my art stuff really took off. I mean, when I was in Paris, I ended up really focusing on my art full time. And I think because I was in a second country, a third country, my own identity came into focus for me. And I started making all these paintings about I'm from Bangladesh originally, about my identity and language. I had a whole series of paintings called Mother Tongue. Then I was invited to actually do a large scale work. This is 9 foot by 7 foot for the Prix Marin Salon. It's an important salon that happens in Paris every year. They invite, I think, a dozen emerging painters to present their work at this salon. And I was invited by, you have to be invited by an established painter. So I did this huge red painting called Open the Door. And they were, and it was very bright for Paris. But yeah, it caused a bit of some controversy, and ended up going then to Bangladesh, and it's actually was exhibited in Bangladesh, and they had a whole like TV program about this show. And it's the painting is in a collection of a human rights lawyer there now. So then I came back to DC in 2010, and I continued my painting. I had a whole series of paintings called Eye Candy that I started in Paris, and I continued here in DC. There was looking at the dichotomy between love and violence. This one used my red boots, sari tops, cut saris. Also used texting in the work itself. And these two works traveled together as part of the 1 in 3 show on gender-based violence, and have been around the world representing the US in that exhibition. And 1 in 3 represents the number of women around the world that experience physical violence or sexual violence in their lifetime. Then I became interested in really I had been a painter all my life, and I really wanted to expand my horizons, and I started to work on paper. I became interested in printmaking. This is a combination of etching and aqua tint and what's called shinkole, and then hand monoprint. And then I became interested in doing installation and performance. This is my very first performance. It was in DC, and also I also performed it during Art Basel in 2012 in the Scope Art Asia Miami tent. It's called Indelible Scent, and I actually lay in the bed for several hours reading books written by women, and the bed was covered with red onions, and I was in a sari. There's a whole canopy of saris around me, and people could text me. My phone number was available in a little card. People could text me and find out what I was reading, and I would send them passages. And at the end of the performance, I cut all these onions, and I wept and everyone wept. I mean, the whole place was like covered in onion smell. But it was a performance about women's autonomy in mind and body. It's kind of a I took the sort of odalisque. Remember the odalisque paintings where like the naked woman lies back in the bed, and I wanted to be like the very much more active and in charge. So anyway, this performance kind of launched my performance art career. It ended up in the Miami Herald and the Basel blog, and then since then I've been doing a lot of performances. And the onions ended up in some of my prints. There's another print, woodblock and etching combination. And then that same year, 2012, the year of big change for me, I launched a long-running collaborative, socially engaged project with the women from my grandmother's village, who I'd been working with for many years on an eco-empowerment project and literacy project, but I hadn't really worked with them directly. I had done some portraits of them and stuff in my art, and decided, wouldn't it be interesting to have them help me do printmaking directly on saris, which has been symbolically used in my work. So I launched this project in 2012, and it's a portrait of all of us from 2013 with our first series of saris. You can see the onion block is being used. These women are all climate survivors, and they're also gender discrimination survivors. They've all learned to read and write as adults. Many of them were married off young, like my grandmother. And so there was a lot of writing as part of this project as well. I also took their interviews and videotaped them and made a 3-channel video installation in which you could hear each woman's voice separately. And then that project was supposed to be a 10-year project initially. I thought I would follow these women for 10 years and see how their lives and climate evolve. But it's already 9 years, and I don't think I'm going to stop. It's like really very interesting. I think it's going to keep going, as long as I can still manage to get to that island. It's very remote. It's like 30 hours by boat to get there from the capital. But so what I'm doing now, I still paint. I still do a lot of printmaking, but the Sari project is continuing. I do collaborative printmaking with people around the world. So a lot of people in DC helped me co-create 65 saris in 2018 and 2019, along with the women of Bangladesh. And we covered 5 buildings. I got a public art grant. So now I'm doing public art, temporary public art. Covered 5 buildings with saris that were covered in woodblock, painting, and also climate pledges by Americans on how we can reduce our carbon footprint. And then I've used the saris in performances. This is my another performance I did in Miami. This was called Jalabayu, which means climate change in Bengali. And it's using 12 saris that were worn by the women of my ancestral village, and we sewed them together. My daughter helped me into a 216-foot long sari. We juxtaposed that sari against the rising sea in Miami as a way of linking these 2 communities and women from one part of the world to another, our bodies, our worn saris, and the rising sea from 2 places. And I ended up in the water at the end, battling the waves for about an hour. Then that sari from that performance was actually featured in a art show I had at the Bangladesh National Museum in 2015. It was sort of as an art piece and also as like a performance ephemera. It also had video from various performances playing in the background. And there was another performance that I did in the street. I continue to paint. A lot of my new paintings are inspired by my performances. This is inspired by Miami. And some images of some of my other installations. This was right before the pandemic in Italy at the Museum of Contemporary Art. And then last year during the pandemic, I had this installation in Georgetown with Robin Bell, who did the projections at night. And we managed to have small groups gather and see it. And then this year, as Maggie mentioned, coming up in May, I'm doing this project, again, collaborating with the community here and in Bangladesh and with Robin Bell. It's going to be a much smaller scale because of the pandemic, but it's going to be in Adams Morgan. I hope you guys can come and see it. There's going to be sculpture and saris and projections at night. That's my new book and my website and my email. So I'm looking forward to hearing about your projects. Thank you.